Have you ever been in a situation where everything around you seems normal until one day something shifts? A moment when your instincts whisper that something's not right, and instead of exploding, you pause and plan? That's exactly what happened to me. Sophie, my husband's coworker, was dropping subtle clues, a glance here, an emoji there, the kind of emotional betrayal that hides in plain sight. It wasn't an affair.
Not yet.
But it was enough to make me feel something was off. I could have panicked. I could have accused. But I didn't. Instead, I took a breath, stepped back, and decided, I'm going to flip the script. You see, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do when trust is tested isn't to shout, but to act with quiet confidence. I didn't need to confront him to reclaim my space. I needed to reconnect, to remind both of us what this relationship was built on. This wasn't a game of jealousy. It was a moment of clarity, a personal challenge. A test I chose to face with emotional intelligence and self-control. What I did next changed everything.
I didn't fight.
I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I took a different path, one that led to the most unexpected emotional turning point in our relationship. And in this video, I'm going to tell you exactly how I took back my power, reshaped the narrative, and redefined what love looks like when you refuse to let subtle infidelity grow into something greater. If you're curious about how calm strategy, self-awareness, and vulnerability can completely shift a relationship dynamic, stay with me. Don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this story with someone who might be facing the same invisible cracks in their marriage. And of course, drop a comment. What would you do if someone was low-key flirting with your partner and they didn't stop it? Let's get into it. You know, there are moments in life when your gut tells you something's off, but instead of rushing in, you're better off taking a step back, letting things unfold. That's where I found myself. Sophie, my husband's coworker, she had this energy, this spark around him that felt different. It was subtle, almost invisible to anyone else, but I noticed. I wasn't about to let anger blind me. No, I was going to watch, observe, and learn. There's something powerful about waiting. It's like standing on the edge of a storm, knowing it might rain, but refusing to move until the first drop falls. It's strange how curiosity can evolve into strategy. At first, I wasn't sure what to make of it. I didn't know if I was just being paranoid, or if there was something more beneath the surface. I didn't want to let my emotions control me, so I chose a path of quiet observation. A simple shift in my perspective. It's funny how you can pick up on tiny shifts in someone's behavior. An extra smile here, a lingering glance there. Nothing overt, but everything felt off. And as much as I wanted to confront it head-on, I knew that wasn't my move. Not yet. What got me, though, was my husband. He wasn't engaging, but he wasn't putting a stop to it either. And that's the part that stung. It wasn't about him having a full-on affair. No, it was the hesitation. The subtle acceptance of something that should have been stopped in its tracks. I wasn't mad at him. Not yet, at least. But I couldn't ignore the unease growing inside me. This wasn't just a flirtation. It was something deeper, a space between us that had started to feel too wide. As I sat back and thought about it, I realized that I needed to regain control, to take the power back. And so, with calm precision, I started my own quiet journey. I wasn't going to let this situation define me. I would handle it my way in my time. And the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I wasn't just reacting to her. I was starting to reclaim my place. The question now was, how would I reconnect with him? Without a single word being spoken about Sophie, there's something about vulnerability that, when embraced, can lead to extraordinary transformations. At first, I wasn't sure where to start, but I knew I had to do something. I wasn't about to let a subtle betrayal disrupt everything we had. So, I made a decision. I would reconnect with him, not through confrontation, but through intention. It wasn't just about physical closeness. It was about reminding him, and myself, of the foundation we'd built. This wasn't a game of manipulation. It was about love, real connection, and trust in marriage. It was strange at first, almost like stepping into a familiar, yet unfamiliar space. We hadn't been as close emotionally lately, and I felt that distance growing. But I wasn't about to let it define us. So, I made an effort, a conscious, deliberate effort to reignite the spark that had once burned brightly between us. A touch here, a word there. Slowly, it began to work. Our connection grew stronger, and what started as a mere physical act became a reminder of how deep our bond really was. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that, in itself, gave me the strength to carry on. What struck me the most was how much control I had over the narrative. It wasn't about confronting him with accusations or questioning his loyalty. No, I didn't need to do that. The emotional suspense of the situation, the love tension, was palpable. What mattered more was the quiet reminder of who I was and who we had been. Our story had been filled with moments of joy, challenges, and triumphs. I wasn't about to let a small act of flirtation rewrite it. I had the power to change the direction of this narrative. As I watched him respond to me, slowly, cautiously, but with genuine affection, I realized something. This wasn't about Sophie. It never was. It was about me taking control of my own emotional story. It was about me showing up for my marriage, for my own sense of self-worth, and for the connection we shared. And just as I began to feel the shift, the realization hit me. We had both been testing trust in different ways. But it didn't have to end in chaos. It could lead to something beautiful, a new chapter in our marriage, one that was built on clarity, intention, and a renewed bond. I always thought I was good at reading people, but Sophie's messages? They had me questioning everything. It wasn't about the words themselves. They were innocent enough, vague even. But there was something in the way she phrased them, the emojis she used, the timing. It all made me feel uneasy. My intuition was screaming that something wasn't right. She wasn't just sending texts. She was sending signals. Subtle, yet undeniable signals. It wasn't just about what was said, it was about what wasn't. It wasn't the direct flirtation that bothered me. My husband, Mark, wasn't engaging in it, at least not outwardly. But he wasn't stopping it either, was he? That's what got under my skin. It's like watching a car wreck happen in slow motion, knowing you can't turn away. His lack of reaction, the way he allowed it to continue without a word, that was what unsettled me. The tension in the air was thick, like a storm waiting to break. I didn't know where to place the blame. Was it him? Or was it Sophie, testing the waters? Either way, it felt like a story of vulnerability, my growing uncertainty. As much as I wanted to confront him, to shout and demand answers, I held back. I knew that pushing for an explanation could lead us down a path I wasn't ready for. Instead, I decided to wait. The more I observed, the more I understood. This wasn't just about Sophie.
This was about me.
About what I was willing to tolerate. My emotional story was unfolding in real time, and the more I analyzed, the more it became clear that I needed to decide what role I was going to play in it. Was I going to be passive? Or was I going to take charge and steer this narrative toward something better? What struck me the most, though, was how the dynamics between us were shifting. I wasn't just observing them. I was changing the dynamic. Every time I held back from reacting, I was asserting control. It wasn't about silence as submission. It was silence as power. And even though I didn't have all the answers yet, I knew this. I was no longer just a passive observer in my own life. I was taking action, in my own quiet way, to regain control over my own emotional tension. There are moments in life when you have to take the reins, not with aggression, but with subtlety, with a quiet strength that leaves no room for doubt. Sophie had crossed a line, but instead of confronting her directly, I chose a different path. I invited her over. Yes, I invited the woman who had been sending those texts, the one who had sparked all this tension. Some might call it a risk, but for me, it felt like the most strategic move I could make. I wasn't trying to start a fight. I was trying to reclaim the power I felt slipping away. The invitation wasn't just for a conversation. It was a statement. I wanted Sophie to understand that I was not intimidated, that I wasn't going to shy away from this uncomfortable moment. It was a way for me to take back control of the narrative. There was a quiet confidence in that decision. I didn't need to be loud or aggressive to make my point. The way I handled the situation would speak volumes, far louder than any confrontation could. And when she accepted, I knew that this wouldn't just be a meeting, it would be a shift in the power dynamics. When Sophie arrived, there was no immediate explosion, no harsh words or accusations. Instead, there was a subtle exchange of energy, one that was more profound than any argument could have been. We sat, we talked, but it wasn't just small talk. There was an underlying tension, a subtle power shift that neither of us acknowledged openly, but both could feel. In that room, I wasn't the wife who was unsure. I was the woman in control. It wasn't just about Sophie anymore. It was about showing myself, and her, that I had the power to change the course of this emotional drama. What surprised me most was how easily the narrative began to shift. The unspoken moments between Sophie and I, the charged silence that hung in the air, were more transformative than anything I could have imagined. What started as a strategic move became an opportunity for something deeper, mutual understanding. There was no need for an all-out confrontation. Instead, we were creating a new dynamic, one based on clarity, respect, and understanding. And as we sat there, I realized that I wasn't just confronting Sophie. I was confronting myself, reclaiming my space, and redefining my role in this tangled web. I never expected this to happen, but sometimes life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. As Sophie and I sat together, there was a moment, a silent moment, where the tension between us shifted. It wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't a fight. It was something quieter, something more profound. We were two women sitting in the same room, yet for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the same wavelength. It was a strange, unexpected connection, one that didn't require words, but was still deeply felt. There was a subtle spark in the air, something charged, but not in a way that was threatening. It was as if we were both acknowledging the elephant in the room without speaking about it. Our interaction wasn't one of competition or conflict. It was more like an exploration of shared curiosity. The tension I had been feeling for so long began to dissolve, replaced by a quiet understanding. Neither of us had to say anything for that moment to speak volumes. It was almost like we both understood something deeper, that there was room for vulnerability and openness, even in the most complicated of situations. What struck me the most was how natural it felt, this shift in our dynamic. It wasn't about betrayal or accusations. It wasn't about competition for his affection. It was about something more personal. It was about me reclaiming my sense of self, my sense of power, and it was about Sophie, in her own way, also reclaiming something. We didn't have to speak it aloud, but I could feel the understanding between us. We were no longer adversaries in this emotional drama. We were simply two women, sitting in the same space, sharing a moment of clarity. By the time Sophie left, I felt something shift within myself. The unease that had once consumed me had faded, replaced by a sense of peace. I realized that sometimes, in order to reclaim control, you don't need to confront the situation with force. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is acknowledge the situation, feel it, and then choose to move through it with grace. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about Sophie anymore.
It was about me.
It was about taking back my own power, my own peace. And I wasn't done yet. It's funny how life can teach you things in the most unexpected ways. Sitting there with Sophie, I found myself in a place I never thought I'd be. Not angry, not jealous, but open. This wasn't about labels or the roles we had been taught to play. It wasn't about who was right or wrong, who was loyal or disloyal. It was about a deeper understanding. As the conversation unfolded, I realized that this wasn't just about attraction. It was about something much more profound, about identity, vulnerability, and presence. There was no judgment, just a shared space where we could both exist without trying to define ourselves. What struck me in that moment was the way we connected, not just emotionally, but on a level that went beyond the surface. We weren't bound by the traditional roles we had been given. I wasn't the wife confronting the other woman. She wasn't just the other woman. We were both simply two people exploring the complexities of our emotions without fear of judgment. There was no competition. There was no blame. There was just a quiet, shared understanding that we were both navigating this world in our own ways, trying to make sense of it all. It wasn't easy, letting go of the need to label everything, to categorize every emotion and every action. But in that space, it felt necessary. Because when you take away the labels, the wife, the coworker, the lover, what you're left with is just raw human experience. I saw that in her, and I saw it in myself. We were both vulnerable in different ways. And in that vulnerability, there was a strange kind of connection. I wasn't trying to understand her actions in terms of right or wrong anymore. I was trying to understand her as a person, and in doing so, I began to understand myself more deeply. As the evening went on, I realized that this wasn't a confrontation at all. It was an exploration. It was about breaking down the walls we had built around ourselves, letting go of the stories we had been told, and just being present with each other. It was about accepting that sometimes the most profound connections don't fit into neat boxes. And as I sat there, listening to her, I knew that this moment was more than just a conversation. It was a quiet revelation, one that would change the way I looked at myself, at her, and at everything that had come before. As I sat there, still processing everything that had unfolded, I heard the door open. Mark had returned home. The dynamic between us was already shifting, but this moment, this reunion, was different. The tension that had been so thick before now felt almost non-existent. Instead of the usual chaos that would follow such situations, there was something new in the air. It wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't a fight. It was a strange, unexpected moment of unity. The emotional distance that had been growing between us seemed to evaporate, and in its place, there was a space for connection, for understanding. What surprised me the most was the way Mark entered the room. He didn't have to say anything. He could feel the change. The way I had handled the situation, had shifted the energy in the room. It was as if he, too, understood that this wasn't about blame or accusations. It was about something deeper. He didn't need to apologize. He didn't need to explain. It was like the power of vulnerability, of taking control, had quietly woven its way into our relationship. We were no longer trapped in the same old patterns. We were finding something new, something unexpected. What struck me in that moment was how much had changed without us even realizing it. There was no drama, no outburst, just a simple recognition that we had both been navigating this emotional drama in our own ways. And now, we were finding a way to meet in the middle. The shift wasn't sudden. It wasn't explosive, but it was real. It was raw, and it felt like the beginning of something much more significant, a new phase in our relationship, one built on trust, vulnerability, and emotional clarity. By the time the evening came to a close, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in weeks. It wasn't about pretending nothing had happened. It was about acknowledging the tension, the betrayal, and the vulnerability, and then moving through it together. I realized then that this wasn't just about Sophie or about Mark. This was about us. It was about finding our way back to each other and discovering that sometimes the most surprising reunions come not from confrontation, but from quiet understanding. What started as a suspicion, as a whisper of doubt, had turned into something entirely unexpected. That night wasn't about settling scores or proving points. It wasn't about winning or losing. No, it was about something more profound. Connection. It was as if, in that moment, all the tension, the questioning, and the emotional weight had been lifted. What replaced it was a quiet understanding between all of us. It wasn't what I had imagined it would be. It was better. It was real. And it was honest. Mark, Sophie, and we found ourselves in a space where the lines between what was expected and what was real began to blur. There was no longer a wife versus the other woman dynamic. There were no more labels, no more accusations. We were simply three people, sharing a moment of truth. The love triangle drama that I had imagined was nothing like the story we were writing now. It wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about understanding, about breaking free from the constraints we had built around ourselves and embracing the complexity of our emotions. What happened next was something I could never have predicted. Instead of a night of conflict, we shared a night of connection. It wasn't about solving everything, about fixing every flaw. It was about being present with each other, about understanding the complexities of our emotions and allowing space for them to exist without judgment. We weren't trying to fit into roles or make sense of everything. We were simply being real, being honest, and in that rawness, finding something new. When the night ended, it wasn't with guilt or confusion. It wasn't with regret. It was with a sense of peace, a sense that we had taken the next step in this journey, not by running away from the truth, but by embracing it. We had found something unexpected in that space, a new understanding of ourselves and each other. And in that, we had created a new narrative, not one defined by betrayal, but by the courage to face our emotions and walk through them together. Have you ever found yourself in a moment where you thought everything was falling apart, only to realize that it was an opportunity to rebuild stronger than before? That's exactly what I learned through this entire journey. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is flip the script on your own terms. Instead of letting betrayal or hurt define you, what if you used it as a chance to reclaim your power and reframe the narrative? This story isn't just about a wife, a husband, and an unexpected connection. It's about vulnerability, trust, and courage. It's about taking back control of your own story, no matter how messy or complicated things seem. We all go through emotional drama, betrayal, and moments of doubt, but it's how we handle it that truly matters. How will you respond the next time life throws a curveball your way? So, I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my shoes? What do you think about flipping the script in your own relationships? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because this isn't just my story, it's a conversation, and I'd love to hear how you would handle a situation like this. Don't forget to hit subscribe, activate your notifications, and share this video with others who need a little reminder that sometimes the biggest power is found in staying calm and reclaiming control.